I want to start off by congratulating you. You've done it. Amidst an entire pandemic, you have managed to become a social distancing expert. Nobody knows 6 feet better than you do. You've also managed to become a Zoom expert. You know how to initiate a meeting. You know how to turn your camera off so you can multitask and do other things. And you also know when to unmute yourself just to prove that you are actually paying attention. You've become an IT expert. Well, maybe not necessarily, but at one point or another, you probably did scream at your screen, and that counts for something. You have proven yourself to be adaptable. We all started out at one space, and now here we are. But what if I told you there was an area where we could all adapt, and it would be for the greater good? Now, before you cringe or roll your eyes, stay with me for a moment. I want you all to close your eyes. We are about to take a social distancing, safe trip, and we're going to go somewhere where the beaches are lovely, the weather is wondrous, and if you're anything like me, you're on a PhD budget, so it has to be affordable. You see where we are? If you've traveled quite a bit, you may recognize this beautiful place I've just described as Cancun, Mexico, a place that this presenter enjoys going. And if you're anything like me, you know that we just can't stay on the resort. It's too safe. We have to get out, experience the culture, experience the authentic cuisine. But as you go along this journey with me, realize that there will be some bumps along the way. If you're like me, you took Spanish in high school. And if you're like me, you forgot Spanish in high school. So on that taxi cab ride, when you're trying to explain where you're going, you may use a map or a picture to really illustrate what you're trying to say because you don't have the words. Your taxi driver is proficient in Spanish, and you are proficient in something that almost approaches Spanglish. You make it there, and you find this wondrous restaurant. But again, you're met with mismatches. Again, somebody is proficient in a language that you have some knowledge in, but it doesn't allow you to fully express your wants, needs, and ideas. It's not that you don't have the capacity. You know what you want to say, but you don't know how to say it. And this presents a feeling that we're all familiar with. Frustration. It doesn't feel good to not be able to communicate or understand what somebody is trying to communicate to you. This feeling, however, is present in many classrooms across America today. There is a group of students who face this frustration day in and day out. They are our culturally and linguistically diverse friends. But what does that mean? We've heard it. It's been a buzz term lately. We want companies to promote it. We want to see it more often. But what does it truly mean to be culturally and linguistically diverse? Well, let's take one example. This handsome young gentleman is my nephew. His name is Cody Jr. He's 5 years old, and he loves to talk. And he can tell you everything about PJ Masks. As intelligent as he is, my nephew is at risk for having difficulties with reading. simply because he is linguistically diverse. Linguistic diversity is the variety of languages, grammar, and vocabulary within a society. We can look at this from the form of dialect, like Southern American English dialect, or the Boston dialect, or what my nephew speaks, which would be African American English dialect. A rule governed system that shows variation in syntax, or the way we put sentences together, morphology, the units of meanings and words, as well as phonology, how we're actually producing those words. You may hear him say things like, "TT, I want that one." That one isn't something that you're going to hear in standard American English. However, it is embraced and loved in African American English dialect. We also have here my Mama Tika's beautiful granddaughters. They are the cutest things that you could ever place your eyes on. Yet, they are also at risk for having difficulty with learning to read. Why? Because they fall into a category of cultural diversity, or being culturally diverse. Cultural diversity is the variety of cultures that exist within a society. And what is culture? Well, it's what makes us who we are. Our religion, our cuisine, our ceremonies. It helps us frame the way we see the world and why we do what we do. It is essential to be able to see yourself within the literature that you're reading. It helps you to learn more. It helps you to tie the information that you're seeing back to things that you already know. It is a crucial aspect, yet it is something that many students are deprived of day in and day out. In this culture, instead of having bacon and eggs for breakfast, my beautiful tikas here would have gallo pinto. And so when we're in a classroom and someone is asking, "Hey, what's appropriate to have for breakfast?" And my friends here say rice and beans, they're not wrong. But it takes having cultural awareness to know that. These friends also fit into the previous category along with my nephew because they're also linguistically diverse. As native Spanish speakers, if they were to grow up here in the US, they would have to acquire English, making them what we call English learners, English second language learners, English language learners, or bilinguals. Those are all under the umbrella of linguistic diversity. And it's this rich diversity that helps us to cultivate these students' imaginations and prepare them for success. However, culturally and linguistically diverse kids are at risk, like I've mentioned before, and they're at risk for having difficulties with reading, learning how to read, and enjoying the process of reading throughout their educational journeys. There's a number of reasons for this, and they need to be addressed. One such reason, is the lack of inclusive literature or inclusive instruction. We need to be able to ensure that we're acknowledging the diversity that we see within our classrooms. Are we choosing books that reflect that of our students? Are we celebrating holidays that reflect what our students would be celebrating at home? Are we showing that appreciation? It's this multi-level that we can really appreciate. One such example in the research today for why this is important is if we take a Spanish-speaking kid, for example. They have their language 1, which is Spanish, and they're acquiring their language 2, which is English. Well, their knowledge of Spanish can support and facilitate their acquisition of English. That then helps them with cognitive flexibility, a skill that will then support them as they learn how letters and sounds come together to help you learn how to read. Yet, if we're not encouraging or implementing this L1, then how do we get this step to help us with our cognitive flexibility? Teacher bias. This comes up again and again where teachers who aren't necessarily checking their biases are putting expectations which are typically low on students, so they're not being pushed to reach the levels that they need to go. We've seen this manifest itself in different ways, where students of color, specifically African American English speakers, are referred for therapy services more often than they need to be because of this bias. And mismatches in ability. Think back to our Cancun vacation. If I am not able to produce what I want to produce, and you're not understanding what I'm saying, how far can we get? It's these issues that come together as the perfect storm. Some of you may be familiar with this infographic. The school to prison pipeline. This is essentially saying that when we have children who have difficulty with reading, it produces a frustration, and reading only gets harder. So then we have students who get so frustrated that they end up dropping out of school, limiting the options that they have. And a lot of times these children are from disadvantaged economic backgrounds because our ability to help these kids learn how to read isn't matching with the resources that we have available. So you pair that with a poor education because I dropped out from frustration, I'm unfortunately led into prison. Now, this isn't the story for all students, and I would certainly hope that for my nephew and for my Tikas, it would not be the case. But it takes some effort to ensure that we don't wind up in this place. And that effort lies in fixing where it starts, the difficulty reading. Remember, I told you at the beginning of this talk that you guys are being praised because you were adaptable. So here's an area that we need to adapt. We have to stop the practice of expecting kids to meet us where we are and meet them where they are. Remember, they're diverse. They come with a unique set, okay? And that will include us doing unique things to reach them. It can look like acknowledging their culture, incorporating books that have different cultures in them, celebrating them, encouraging that your voice matters, that representation matters. It speaks volumes for these kids, and they're able to relate in ways that they would not maybe if that wasn't happening. Celebrating that home language or dialect. There is nothing wrong with being an African American English speaker. There is nothing wrong with being bilingual. However, you will find parents who question this, parents who will say, is it something wrong? And no, there isn't, but we need to normalize this narrative. We need to celebrate this within our schools and within our literature. Incorporating the family is another major piece. Using their knowledge, using the books that are important to them to then close this gap. Providing explicit instruction when needed. Some kids need you to sit down with them, and they need that one-on-one. And that is perfectly acceptable, but you have to be available to provide it. And last encouraging reading in both languages. There's research for all of these different areas, but it's up to us, the adaptables, to ensure that it's happening. So I'd like to leave you with this, that these spaces, these beautiful, culturally and linguistically diverse spaces, grow up to become this. These beautiful, successful, culturally and linguistically diverse adults, because we made this decision that we were going to be adaptable. Thank you so much.